Hi everybody, welcome to Goat Sports Performance. Dr. Tim Baghurst here, joined by Dr. Brian Whitacre, a professor in agriculture here at Oklahoma State University. And you may think that's a little strange asking an ag professor on, but he's actually a natural bodybuilder, a world champion. And so Brian, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Just tell us a little bit about how you got into bodybuilding and where you've gone in your career.
Sure, thanks for having me, Tim. Like Tim said, my name is Brian Whitacre. I've been a competitive natural bodybuilder since about 2003, so it's been quite a while now. I got into bodybuilding as when I started graduate school. I'd always been interested in the gym, training in the gym, but I'd never really given competitive bodybuilding a thought until a couple of guys in the local gym talked me into it. I did a small local contest back in graduate school, went on from there. A couple years later, I was fortunate enough to turn pro, and then in 2006, I started competing as a pro. And basically, almost every year since then, I competed at the World Championships for one of the natural bodybuilding organizations, and did fairly well, but was never able to win the whole title until 2015. So that was my last competition, was in 2015, and I finally was able to accomplish what I set out to do, which was become the overall world champion.
So just to clarify, you compete in your age category. Your weight category, and then you have an overall competition for the winners of the weight categories to determine the overall winner. So 2015 was kind of the culmination of everything where you kind of took both titles.
That's right. So I compete in the lightweight class. So natural bodybuilding lightweight classes usually run in the 165, 170 range, and so I'm right around there when I compete, around 165. And so I was successful in the lightweight class. I was able to win the lightweight class at the World Championships in 2007, 2008, 2010, 2012. Etc. But I was never able to accomplish that overall. The middleweight always beat me, or the heavyweight always beat me, and so that was my goal for a long time, is to finally win this whole thing. And it took me 10 plus years to be able to do that, but I finally did it in 2015.
And I think we have some video here of you doing one of your poses before, I think, the 2015. So, you've been competing for many years. What kind of drives that motivation year after year after year when you're, almost that close to overall, but you're not quite there and you've got to do it all again and you only get one shot, really?
Yeah. So there's no doubt to me that failure is a huge motivator for me. So year after year, when I went out there and gave it my best shot, and I went through all this, long preps, 26 weeks of, killing myself with training and dieting, and made a lot of sacrifices, and to come up short, man, I tell you what, I thought about that the next time I went through prep. I thought about coming up just a bit short and how I could push harder and how I could do things differently and improve upon what I accomplished last time.
So, okay, I was planning on asking this later, but it ties in really well. You said 2015 was your last big competition, and you've had some injuries since that you're trying to rehab from. What kind of sustains you to say, now that you've accomplished your big goal, your kind of dream goal, what drives you then to say, I want to do this again and I want to kind of stay at the top? Because that happens for a lot of athletes,
Yeah.
right? They have this dream goal, whether it be the Olympics or World Championships, they achieve it, and then there's nothing. They're kind of flat. So
Yeah.
how do you kind of build that back up?
It is a different challenge for me because, like I said, that was the pinnacle of my career. I accomplished what I wanted to do, and then, to be honest, when I came back from that, I set out to start training again, and my training was going good, and it was a different perspective for me. Instead of saying I'm going to beat that guy this time around, I kept thinking, okay, those guys are coming after me now. I've got to train this way, and so that was kind of how I framed it in terms of my training after the contest. And unfortunately, I had some injuries, so I haven't been able to kind of take a step back and get that fire back in terms of training yet. But I'm hopeful that's the approach I'll take with it. Is now I'm the one with the target on my back, and I've got to train an extra notch higher because those guys are coming after me.
Right. So you're no longer the hunter; you're the hunted.
That's right.
Right. You've talked to me before, not on camera, but about your nutrition, and it kind of gives you an edge. And explain a little bit more by what you mean in that, because bodybuilding is not only building size and proportion, but it's also being able to see that when you compete.
That's right, and that's honestly the reason I've been successful. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'9", 160 some pounds on stage, and there's plenty of natural guys that are way bigger than that. We have guys in the 180s, 190s, 200s that compete. The reason I'm able to be successful is because I really push myself in terms of the diet and get leaner than most people do, and then I have pretty good overall symmetry, meaning there's good balance between my upper body and lower body, and that's something I train for. So in terms of the nutrition, I've been at this quite a while now. I know what my body responds to and how the steps I need to take to get down into what I call contest shape. And it's not something that I can do in uh, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. It's something that takes me half a year to do. And so I prep for, a minimum of 26 weeks. And every single day of those 26 weeks, I know exactly what's going in my mouth. It's food that I've cooked. It's the weighed amount of carbs and protein and fat, and I don't ever deviate from that. And that's it's part of my Type A personality. But really, you have to have that plan and stick with it to push yourself in the direction you want to go.
Now you're obviously a full-time employee.
Right.
Work full-time. You have a family, 3 kids, right?
Right.
And how do you juggle the intense training that you have to do with the family life, with a full-time job? It happens to a lot of athletes. How do you manage that to make sure that when you compete, you're at your very best?
That's a good question. I actually talk a lot about this. I've given some seminars on this topic because my economics training actually comes in here. We have this concept called constrained optimization, where you've got some kind of constraint. And for me, well, if you think about, let me take a step back. I've seen a lot of people in the bodybuilding world have other parts of their life suffer. So they think, I've got to do this. I'm pushing myself really hard in the gym. I'm not going to, pay as much attention to my family or my work. I've seen relationships, die because of it. I've seen jobs lost because of it. And so to me, I always put bodybuilding third. So family's number one. That's the number one priority. You accomplish everything you can there. Job's number two. Accomplish everything you can there, and then is bodybuilding. So for me, if I had a heavy training set up and I was looking forward to that training day that day, and my wife called and said, hey, kids are sick, I need you at home, I'm not going to say, sorry, I got to go train. Of course my priorities are going to be family first. And so I optimize everything that I can in terms of family, and then job, and then finally bodybuilding is next for me. That's not to say I don't give it my best shot, but I just have my priorities in order.
Right. Now bodybuilding it can be a very ego-oriented sport where you're looking at yourself a lot and you're always comparing yourself to others, etc. And I've heard you say before that you don't have an ego when it comes to bodybuilding, and that's very different to what I would see when I go and work out in the gym, where people are posing in the gym, they're comparing themselves to others, they're talking about how great their workouts are and how big they are and how much they can lift. So what do you mean by that, where you just don't like ego? What does that mean?
One of the biggest turnoffs to me about bodybuilding is that this perception that we're all just narcissists and we all just love staring at ourselves in the mirror and talking about how great we are. I cannot stand that. And so I try to combat that by, as you say, kind of just not projecting any kind of ego at all. And so if you guys, if you go to my website, I have this whole thing, I don't wear tank tops, I don't pose in the gym, I don't drop weights and scream and call attention to myself. To me, the guys in the gym that I'm gonna, admire and pay attention to is simply the guys that work hard. I don't care if you're over there, I don't care if you're benching 500 pounds, if you're screaming and calling attention to yourself, I'm just gonna completely ignore you. That doesn't impress me. I don't care, the guy over there that's squatting one plate, that's working hard, that's trying his best and getting his form perfect, that's the guy I'm gonna go pay a compliment to. Okay, so it's all about work ethic to me. It's not about just, hey, look at me, I'm great. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I'm not a big social media user, is because when I get on social media, it's basically just people saying, look at me. And that's not something I try to project, and I'm not comfortable doing. And so that's my take on that.
Okay. Well, I've heard you talk about what makes a champion. And I want to pull up a slide here and ask you to talk a little bit about this, because this is what you've told me and others. And so just explain a little bit about your kind of philosophy here about what champions do and what champions don't do.
So yeah, I've given this is a little seminar I put together after I finally won in 2015, and so I'll walk through the bullets that I go through in this seminar. And the first one is to give it everything you've got every time around. So when we talk about people that didn't quite accomplish their goals the last time, they say, oh, I really regret that, or I have some regrets about that contest. I never have regrets, because I push myself to the absolute limit every time. And so basically, if I give it everything I have, there's no regrets. And so what I do is that kind of leads into number two, is to learn from the past. So I learn from that experience. I don't have a regret about it. I learn from it, and I put into action kind of a new plan. And so again, always learn from the past. The failure is a great teacher. And so I learned from those failures, and I put together a plan on how I'm going to accomplish things the next time. And that kind of again leans into number 3 here. Honestly, assess their weaknesses. And so, regardless if you're a bodybuilder or a any kind of athlete, you need to take a step back and figure out why have I been losing? What are the weaknesses that I need to address? And for bodybuilders, it's specific body parts, it's posing, and so I kind of make the point. Even after the last contest where I won everything, I went out of my way to contact every single one of the judges from all my shows and said, what can I do better? And on the plane ride back from winning, the world championship, I was putting together a plan for how I was going to improve for next time around. And so you never stop trying to improve. And so I was always thinking about my weaknesses and how I can get better. And then the last one there, visualization is a big part of how you can succeed. And so I use that in both leading up to my training. So if you've got a heavy deadlift or a heavy squat day coming up, I visualize that days in advance about how I'm going to approach that training session and how I'm going to hit the numbers that I want to. And certainly when you're on stage, I visualize myself posing the way I want to, performing the way I want to, and that certainly comes down to, can be tied into a lot of other sports as well.
Okay.
And then the last 2 things there, I also have a couple that I think champions don't do, and that is, the first one is to lose focus. A lot of preps nowadays in the bodybuilding world are very long. Like I said, 26 weeks. It's hard to keep your focus on a goal for that entire time. And one of my stronger points is I'm able to maintain my intensity, my focus for a long period of time like that, and not lose sight of the goal. And then also I always hear excuses. In all realms of the sports world, you hear people making excuses about, oh, it's just not a good time for me, or so and so had it easier than me. That's not something champions do. They push through, they overcome obstacles, and so that's kind of my little take on the whole what makes a champion.
And you mentioned visualization, and here we can see you posing, and you've talked about the psychological components of posing, which is unique, right? You're standing up there, everybody's looking at you and judging you, not necessarily for a skill that you're demonstrating, but for a pose that you're holding. Talk a little bit about visualization and the psychology of posing.
Sure. So you guys see here the actual time we spend on stage. What you don't see is the 26 weeks leading up to that, where I was practicing this on a daily basis. And as I was going through this, with nobody in the audience, just me by myself, I was visualizing my time on stage and knowing that my competitors were going to be very, very good. And how can I hit the pose to draw attention to myself and make myself look optimal. And again, I can't control what my competitors are going to do, but what I can do is make sure that I've optimized every aspect of my prep. And so I've visualized, okay, when I'm in this pose, I need to make sure my arms are in this position. I'm squeezing my glutes as tight as I can. So every little aspect of posing is something that I've thought about. So again, daily as I went through this kind of routine, and then it finally pays off. It's just second nature by the time you're finally on stage. And that's true for people who go to sleep at night thinking about bottom of the ninth and full count, and they're thinking about being in the batter's box. So it's regardless of the sport, you're visualizing how you're going to be successful.
So one of the things that you're mentioning is how to be successful. Sometimes people visualize their failures, and that's one of the things that you have to avoid doing is not, I'm self-critical. This isn't going to work. I see myself in the bottom of the ninth and I miss it. I strike out. And so remaining positive even in those situations where you maybe want to be critical of yourself is important as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that never crosses my mind when I'm visualizing. I always see myself being successful, having the best physique that I possibly can and accomplishing my goal. In terms of visualization, that's got to be part of what you're thinking.
Well, here's Brian's website, and you can visit there and reach out to him if you have any further questions. I've got one more question, and Brian, it's really about coaching and the value of having a coach or a mentor to help you perform. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it's helped you and how it could help other athletes?
Sure, and honestly, when I first started bodybuilding, I was one of those guys who said, I'm going to do this all on my own. I actually enjoyed the training and putting together the training for myself, putting together the nutrition, and it wasn't until the latter part of my career where I actually did reach out to some well-known people in this field. I had Lane Norton help me with some of my dieting. I had Dr. Mike Zordos do some of my training, and so those guys were able to beyond what I could see, provide just an extra set of eyes to say, hey, you're not doing this optimally. And these guys are, they're experts in their field. So having that coach there, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I like to learn about it, but that's not my main field. And so having a coach is, again, just that extra set of eyes that's going to give you a different perspective on things. It's going to make you think about things in a different way, going to push you maybe a little bit. If there was a week or two where I was like, man, this diet is killing me, and Lane said, you got to step it up a notch, and just hearing that is going to take me to the next level. So there's definitely a value in having coaches. And again, I think that's true regardless of the sport that you're looking for.
Well, Brian, thanks so much for joining me. Of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to his website. My information, of course, is on mine, which is goatsports.pro. But until next time, thanks for watching.